So thank you so much for asking me to come. It's very interesting to have yourself introduced in another language that you don't understand, because we invited this idiot to come and join us. We don't know why he's here, but he's going to talk about something. So anyway, let's get going. So a quick background. Somebody asked me a few days ago about how I got involved in doing this work, because it's been a journey for me since late 70, early 71. And this, again, to sort of partly humor and partly to bring us into reality. The simple answer of why I got involved in this work is hormones. Because I was 16 going 17, and we were, Northern Ireland was descending into crisis, major violent crisis. And the headmaster of the school I was attending and about not too distant, and was going to leave to go into the world of work. And he came into our study room and he said, I need 4 volunteers to go to a conference. You, and you, and you. So I got sent to a conference. And during that conference, a person who became a great friend, mentor to me in the future, was a young teacher called Derek Wilson. And he was presenting, and he talked about this place, Carrymila, which I'll say a little bit more about. And it seemed he was talking sense. It just seemed to be speaking something to, not just to my head, but to my heart. So we had a chance to meet and greet some of the speakers, so I thought I would head to Derek. And then Derek paled, he disappeared into the background for me, because there were 4 young women. I went to an all-boys Catholic school, and there were 4 very attractive young women from another school there, who were all going, we would love to go to Carrymila. And I'm thinking, I'm going to Carrymila. So, and then the story got taken over. So in truth, hormones got me started. And I'm telling that to kind of put us in perspective. What keeps us in the room? How did we get in the room? What maintains us in the room? We are human beings. There's a passion that we need to feel. There's an engagement which we need to feel, as well as believing it's right work. Otherwise, we'll burn out and blow up eventually. Because, as I'll say, you're walking a long, hard, and very, very difficult road. And that's clear from the work you talked about this morning in the models. And the first thing I want to do, I'll say it towards the end, is to honor that journey. It is simply a very hard journey that you're trying to meet, and you're trying to face into the reality of the storms that come and go around you, because it's not a steady state system. It changes. So hence my title, Changing Times. So I want to, you probably know this guy, he's good Jewish background. But he came up with 2 things that inspire, two statements which I want to offer you. You may know them, but I think they're critical to how we step forward and step up into the work that you're called into and we are called into. So we cannot solve our problems by the same thinking we used to create them. We've got to go beyond this. And insanity, I like this one. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get a different result. I'm afraid I've been in the asylum for a long time. So I think it's time, sometimes you have to look at the core of your work and be prepared to move beyond doing the familiar. And for the funders in the room, you have to trust us sometimes to get beyond doing the familiar, and allow us to break the ground, with the risk that it just may be another dead end. So, to say something about Carrymila, Carrymila was formed in 1965. I have the honor of being relatively new, of about 6 weeks, executive director. I've had obviously an involvement over the last 40 odd years in different forms. But like you, we have stood up into this work, to work for society whose priorities are justice, mutual respect, participation of all, concern for the vulnerable and the stranger, stewardship and care for creation, through the promotion of dialogue, conflict, resolution and reconciliation in Northern Ireland and beyond. So nothing too difficult there then. It's a very broad range, but it is important reference point as we make choices about who we are in the world and how we as Corrymeela and other people in this work decide to show up. What are the values that you wish to show up with? What's maintaining you? What's sustaining you? Apart from a belief that there's a problem and needing to deal with a problem. Context matters. So, are you the kayak? Or are you the shark? Who's who here? Because the perspective changes depending on which lens we use. There are many points of perspective that are emerging in, which we need to address. I mean, I was fascinated by some of the discussion today in terms of the local context, and it was a very clear and important regional and local analysis going on. But there are broader realities approaching us. There are some big sharks out in the water. If you add up global debt, that is everything we owe each other across the world, it's in excess of $30 trillion. Global GDP doesn't meet $20 trillion. We're bankrupt, but we haven't agreed that we're bankrupt yet. Because the only thing that can happen is that debt's going to increase. So the malls that I passed today, which wants to convert more and more of the planet to goods that we want to buy, you're going to have a problem. This is coming down towards us. And we're all going to have to begin to think about this. The IPCC report published, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was published a few weeks back. It's very clear we're in trouble. I think, as I understand your situation here, water is an issue. It's going to get to be a bigger issue if climate change models operate the way they're projecting for you. You're going to have less rainfall. So there are many lenses and perspectives, whether they're economic, global, local, as well. And I just want to understand that context matters, because there was a passionate discussion around that, and you're right. I want to walk through a range of issues. I've been tracking the model. I've had a chance to talk with Addy and some of the team and walk through, and Karen, and think through some of the model. And I think there's huge value, by the way, in the learning that you've taken. And it mirrors a lot of our learning. But it calls you into some new levels of thinking, I think. It's not just writing the model onto a page and then saying, good, we've got that. Because that's, in a sense, the starting point. It's not the beginning of the end. It's the end of the beginning. So you've been building expertise, staff, and so forth. And you need to keep, you've got a lot of operational challenges, as I have as executive director. How do we keep the organization going? One of your speakers was talking about, those realities in terms of how we do this. How fit for purpose is are the agencies we work for? Are we fit for purpose? Do we have the skill sets we need? Do we have coherent programs? Do we know well enough what we're doing? I think you've done a lot of work on that. However, when you step back from that and you meet the pressures, I'll speak a little bit more directly to this later, there are broader organizational dynamics. Are we overstressed? Are we trying to do too much? Is our vision and purpose current and clear? And do we have the competencies? Or do we even know what the competencies are that we need? Does that word competencies translate? Okay. The skills that we need. And particularly when you're working in multi-party, a multi-agency. Partnerships. I was told I shouldn't use the word collaborative, but we use the word collaboratives in Northern Ireland, but it's not a negative term. It is about a group of people, because partnerships for us, I'll take a moment on this. We talked funders over the last 10 years into a lot of illusional and delusional partnerships. By that I mean there were partnerships of convenience to get money. The funder out there said you should come forward as a multi-party or multi-stakeholder group. So we just found people to agree to put their names on the application. And fundamentally it was 3 or 4 different agencies tied into getting 3 and 4 different budgets. They were never operating as a collaborative. And for me, that's the weave when we each create added value. Where do we find added value? Because we have to seek, if we're going to do this work, we cannot do it on our own. And I'll say a little bit more about that. We will burn out and we won't make the impact that we're called to make. And those out there we're looking to support and create a new world for, and out of their needs and out of that vision that you have, we won't get there. We have to be better at understanding that. There's also a context shift. This is particularly true in Northern Ireland. I'm talking to this mainly as from a Northern Ireland perspective. But funding patterns are shifting. Northern Ireland isn't quite as sexy as it used to be for the funders, because we've drawn the money down for a long time. So they kind of think, well, you've had a lot, so we're going to move it elsewhere. And yet the work is long term as well. As you were talking today, there are major political dynamics. I'm going to say something more about that shortly, and social dynamics. I'll say more about these in a moment or two. And then we need to pay attention, because fundamentally what I see in the model is a recognition of, and this is where we arrived to this conclusion, as well some time ago out of the work, was that fundamentally we are trying to engage systemic change. It's a systems level change. It's not just can we alleviate that problem, that issue for that group of people. That's important, but if you're starving and what you need is a fish, then that's what's needed. But from the development point later on, we may need to help you think how to move into looking after surviving in a new way. So we have to understand that, and that I was happy to see that's kind of witnessed across the table, and some of the reflections and near debate that was emerging about how the model might work at various levels. But the model on its own evolved from the civic society, cannot make the systemic level change that you would hope for it. It can inform, but it can't make the change. You need to new partners, you need different level. Where is health involved in this, as well as education? How, where are the economic systems? Where are the jobs for the folks? I'm currently working, some of my staff are working with what is called disengaged youth in Northern Ireland. If you've been tracking the news, you'll have seen you may have seen some riots going on, some conflict going on over flags in Northern Ireland. Well, we do that a lot. But it's a particular group of youth who are disengaged, and it's particularly on the Protestant young men, on the unionist, from the unionist community. Loyalist is a sense, a term for more working class, the marginalised groups inside the unionist community. And they feel they've had a very hard deal because the world changed, and they used to follow their fathers and their grandfathers into big industries, and those industries left Britain, left Northern Ireland, and went elsewhere. So they woke up one day with no skills and no future, or limited skills and a limited future. And so, but they were also told, but you're the special ones, because you're Protestant. You're special. This country belongs to you. This was a Protestant country with a Protestant parliament for a Protestant people. So it echoes, a lot of your conversations had echoes for me as a young man who grew up as a Catholic in Northern Ireland. So we have to, so if the model is to work, you've got to look at it through a series of layers and lenses, because that's what we have really been having to do and to engage on. And that's what I'm currently working on and trying to build up. This is not me telling you this is what you need to do. This is what we are showing up to do right now in Northern Ireland. Part of this presentation I gave at the weekend, because it's that live, it's that relevant to us at the moment. So one of the things that we're really struggling with in Northern Ireland is, where are we trying to go? Because we have gone into a thing about different perspectives. Can you see it there? You can see the bottom. The punchline says, the top says, "I did not slap you," and the bottom says, I high-fived you. I didn't slap you in the face. I gave you a high five. You just missed. So, and it's just a humorous way of trying to different perspectives come in about last time I had the privilege to be here with some of my good friends in the audience who've come by and are part of the project. I was talking to someone who's an ex-sergeant, part of breaking the silence. Part of the rationale he had was, I don't want to kill you, but you make me do it. We don't want to have to shoot you, but your behavior makes me do it. So we create rationales for ourselves. The other thing that we learned and have been learning and are going back to learning, which I was curious, because there's a sort of map work, there's a sort of a nice sort of matrix inside the model. And there's an old saying, to use a military saying, the first casualty of I've taken out the military part of it, but the real saying was, the first casualty of war is the plan. I've converted it to, the first casualty of reality is the plan. So, because you're going to have to adapt and adjust, and I suppose that message is coming through hard. You have the map, but then you have the reality. The map, your plan is at best a two-dimensional structure, and reality is at least 3 or 4 if you allow time to come into it. It's a 4-dimensional structure. So we need to be smart about that. And again, I'm going to try and reference this because I would be doing that back home, is funders need to understand that. I'm not just making a plea for money. That's not my point. I'm making a plea for understanding how this works. You know, it just doesn't show up on a 3-year plan. And then, great, it's done. You know, we would have all been out of a job a long time ago if that was the case. And I would have been happy to be out of a job in that sense. So here, I'm going to go now sort of more towards a Northern Ireland perspective. You can make the connections as and if they're relevant to you. Probably, in my view, our biggest single challenge is the comfortable middle has gone away. By who do I mean? Middle class is too easy a statement. You could say middle class, but it's not just a class issue. It's those who feel comfortable, have looked at the situation. So a lot of them got off to the golf club, and they'll look over the golf club every now and again and say, "They still fighting? I'll go and have another round of golf and see what happens next." By that I mean it's inconvenient. I was working with a group of young adults. For this time last week, actually, it was a week ago. And these were bright kids, between 18 and 20, all at university, and had grown up in fairly, stable, healthy homes. And I asked them the question, who of you thinks that sectarianism, you might use the term racism or something, but I actually think that your conflict is sectarian because it has both a political and a religious dimension to it at times. So I think that's how I understand sectarianism, but what we call it is not really important. We call ours sectarian. I asked them, who of you thinks that sectarianism has and or will play a part in your future? And not one of them put their hand up. I don't know if there are people out in your world who decided not getting involved with this noise. It's too hard, it's too inconvenient, it's too difficult. I'm just happy to have my nice home, my nice job, my nice car, my nice husband, my nice wife, my 2.3 children, whatever. And I really don't want to get involved anymore. It's too hard. They've abandoned the field. And these are the bright ones. These aren't the people you're trying to convince who are really in the teeth of the storm out on the edge, who have the biggest journey to make and the biggest set of reasons not to make it. So it's a serious issue, and it's one we are now stepping up to. We have chosen to step up to it because I know, and I'm not talking about the establishment here. I'm talking about the moderates who are not in this room, the people who actually, liberal moderates, who actually believe we do need to find a more cohesive way of living together. And they believe in the principles of interdependence and diversity and equity and sustainability. They have no difficulty saying, yeah, I'm for this. But they have huge difficulty showing up to the work because it's inconvenient and hard. And yet, back to the shark picture, time moves on and old certainties are failing across all the dominant competing narratives. In other words, on the Sinn Féin, this is the sort of more the Republican side. Life is only meaningful if we're in an all-Ireland situation. The old certainties, Ireland is a Catholic country. Ireland is secularizing like you wouldn't believe. Why? I don't know how much you've picked up, but there was been huge scandals over child sexual abuse by priests and such things. All the priests know, but that's not the point. The whole failure of the church to speak a vision of the future as opposed to a commitment to the past against the reality of the now has been, and so people, this isn't inside the Northern Ireland context of conflict and the two sides. This is inside a relatively stable country. And then again, it's Ireland was the top of the tree at one point, probably in the late 80s. We called it the Celtic Tiger. Everybody wanted to be Irish. Couldn't do wrong. And they swallowed that line, overextended their credit, and the world imploded. There's 6.5-7 million people in Ireland, and they owe collectively, because like you, I don't know what happened through the economic crash here, but the government decided to hand the burden of debt to the citizen for what the bankers did. And so collectively, they owe over $20 billion. So Ireland is facing the reality that the new generation is going to be poorer than my generation. We're the first generation to hand on a legacy of less possibility and less to the future. There's a term, habitus, that I'm kind of calling forward in different parts of my work. Habitus are all those patterns of belief and patterns of action and obviously habit that a culture has. And the major challenge in this is not this is where you have a set of formal rules, and then you can have inside organizations as well. You can have a set of formal rules, then you can have a set of informal rules. But the real problem in changing people's belief patterns are the tacit rules, the hidden rules that no one speaks about. That's just embedded belief because you grew up with it. You grew within this way of thinking. And it's very hard. And when someone says that doesn't work anymore, it's very hard to say, "Oh, that's okay. I'll change my whole understanding of the world." Therefore, it's just harder than that. I put this phrase in because this is the core of your work, but it's also the core of our work. Someone who was a volunteer with me along many years ago has become a youth worker. His name was Rab, and I entered a conversation with him last year, and it happened to be about Caramila. And he said, I love and hate this place. I said, that's an interesting thing to say. I said, I love it because it showed me a world that I never knew existed. And I hate it because I could no longer live in the world I came from. And that's at the heart of what you're trying to do. Because when people wake up and look back, how do you go home and say to those around you, I don't believe you anymore? I don't buy these things. I don't buy these values. How many of you can sacrifice your family and your friends who will reject you if you come back with a new understanding? This is deep pain and deep difficulty. And that's at the core of who we are. Because as to go back to the second point, the old certainties, as old certainties fade, very often at the human side of things, the psychological side is we defend them more and more because they're getting pushed into a tighter and tighter corner. And so what's happened is we have created two competing narratives the narrative of the Unionist and the narrative of the Republican, the Irish narrative, the British narrative and the Irish narrative, if you want. And we, the good people, who want to make a difference about all this, have worked very hard at trying to get people from that side to go and meet people from that side. And imagine having a conversation in the belief that through that conversation, they will actually want to be in the space that we think we should be in, which is a multicultural, shared society, back to that statement. So to do that, and I'm curious about your model in this, there are some dangers I want to get to. I'll take us through this, and I'll take us through the dangers. Because this is why, when I go back to the competing narratives are failing, and I give some perspective about background change. So if you have been tracking the news now in Northern Ireland, now there's no reason why you should, but we had a lot of serious rioting last year because Belfast City Council, disgustingly decided to take down the British flag from flying 365 days a year, which it doesn't fly in the UK. Across the UK, it flies on what's called designated days. There are about 14, I think, designated days. In other words, the Queen's birthday or such thing. There's particular days when you fly the flag. It's about 14 of them. Okay? And Belfast City Council simply decided that they were going to fly it on designated days. And the world erupted. In fact, the loyalist world erupted because they're stealing our flag. No longer and it's like they're trying to take, this quote is, they're taking the Britishness out of Northern Ireland. It's no longer trying to take Northern Ireland out of Britain. It's now they're taking Britishness out of Northern Ireland. The perspective just shifted. Constitutionally, we're safe, but and they now have an interesting phrase. It's called the greening of the orange. So anything that removes the certainty of perhaps, if I bring it to the local context, of the certainty of a Jewish state over the certainty of a Palestinian state is a failure somehow to deal with loss. And yet, I don't know if you can see this, the demographic reality of Belfast is it has an increasingly Catholic population who are saying, well, actually, we just want to be normal in this situation. They could have agreed to take the whole thing down, never fly it. But what they tried to do was say, no, let's do this, let's normalize this. The problem you've got when this happens, and it'll come through in a number of situations here, is when you have a power structure like this, and you equalize it or you make it more equitable, these people feel good because they have gone up in the world. And these people live with a deep sense of loss. Okay, and that's very human. And we don't understand that. If human beings in evolutionary terms are triggered to mitigate against loss, we instinctively don't like it. If somebody phones, you might have £1 million in the bank, and somebody phones up and says, I've lost £1,000. Doesn't really make a big difference to you, but you'll feel it. It's not okay. But if the bank phoned up and said, you have £1 million in the bank and you've just given you we just thought we like you, so we're giving you another £1,000, happy days, even though it doesn't make any difference to your wealth. Human beings dislike loss at a deep psychological and evolutionary level because it triggers survival instincts. It triggers deep parts of our brain. So not only is Belfast going green, our population, for all kinds of demographic reasons, Catholic population is increasing in Northern Ireland. Something you may not know, a little bit of boring history for a moment, is when Northern Ireland was created in 1922, and a term that's often used for Northern Ireland, the most common term, is Ulster. And Ulster was one of 4 provinces of Ireland. It was a province. And as a province of Ireland, it had 9 counties. 9. And at 1922, they shaved off 3. They arbitrarily drew a line on the map and shaved off 3 counties to ensure that a 2/3 third Protestant majority would be created. So you've now got not only a demographic issue, you've got a democratic issue, because the state is constructed to give hegemony, as you described it, to one group. But over time, that's how it started off, 2/3, 1/3. Look at the bulge it's heading towards this. And this is what Sinn Féin plays, and it frightens the heck out of the unionists, because they simply say, we're just going to wait. We're just going to wait you out. And then we'll get you. We're creeping up here. Our kids are on the way through. And then we'll run a referendum and we'll get our United Ireland. And of course, that's triggering all kinds of fear. But this FSME is the schools meals issue. It's about poverty. Okay, and this shows that while Catholics were always part of the underclass, a huge part of the underclass, Catholic girls are doing really well here. Protestant girls are doing okay. It looks like girls are smarter than the boys, but I don't want to believe that, because gender equality means we have to be exactly the same.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Oh, no, okay. Just your time is coming.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
yes, okay. But if you look down that end, Protestant boys, this is the underclass I was talking about, are really struggling. Okay, they're really struggling out there. So we're going to have to do something. I want to reflect a little bit then about what we've been trying to do now. So, and by organisation, you can talk about organisations. You are trying, and I'm calling that we've tried to now to get it back to our systemic work. We're trying to get a little bit more effective relationship between the needs at the community level, the funders, and the organisations. Too often they're seen as separate and distinct. In English, they're siloed. They're kept in distinct boundaries. And actually, they need to become part of the same engine. And therefore, we need a longer perspective. And in part of that, the funders particularly need to get engaged. We need to kind of common envision. We need to envision what we're trying to do. We need to enable. That means we need to release the funds to do the work. Then we've got to enact the policy frameworks, the practical frameworks to get it done. And then they need to entrust us to get on and do it. Not blind trust, to entrust, because they also need to ensure that we're doing it. We need to be accountable, it needs to be open, it needs to be transparent. However, our job, and I think you've done a really good piece of work here, but this is what we're trying to do, is to inspire, is to imagine a new set of possibilities. But beyond us inspire, we need to aspire. We need to believe we can do better. We need to raise the bar. We need to conspire. We need to work together. We need to breathe together, think together. We need to perspire. We need to work hard. It's about working hard. We need to show up at this work, and it is hard work. And then we need to respire. We need the respiration. We need to breathe. We need to have the chance to step back and reflect and do better. And if we don't, we will expire. Okay, because we will either leave the work or we'll just burn out. So our challenge, how do I, and this goes now, this is a particular point that I've put in and led to me trying to do some work, but how do I or we avoid being co-opted by our madness? By that I mean, I spent so much time trying to create the bridging point between the two divides, that I lost my own voice in the middle of it. Because both sides, in their own sense, in my view, are mad, in the sense that they don't bear out a reality that is sustainable. They're based on myth. They're based on identities which are competitive and aren't about any form of cohesion. And I needed to step back, and I needed to find the space. And that's what I've been doing over the last few years, is to try and refine the space where I'm not just facilitating, but I'm also able to speak about the aspiration of a shared society based on mutual trust, based on these things. That I want to be able to speak to that space, and because I believe that it's worth trying. And too often I spend my time trying to keep the edges, just imagining having a conversation. And they don't know what I stand for, because I might lose my alignment in the middle of all that. We are in political trouble in Northern Ireland. We have settled for a shared out politics with no agreed vision. Zero sum, I'll come to that. In other words, not a shared space, but you get this and we get this. You get this, we get this. We have gone for what I call barely tolerated coexistence, which breeds the danger of securing tacit co-resistance. That's the hidden thing, which is, well, as long as you stay over there, it's okay. We'll give you enough to just survive and stay there, and don't bother me. But part of the tacit story of that is we're not going anywhere together. And we have no common language for it, and we have no common view of it. Because our politics keep telling us the story is you can't go together. It's either our way or the highway. Then the other situation, back to the shark again, is because of this timeline, because of these other realities that come through, like economic change, when perceptions of economic or cultural scarcity, in other words, you take a flag down to fly on designated days, the symbol, the flag, becomes imbued with all kinds of power and authority and value, which it should never have. Because when jobs go overseas, then it feels like you're in a limiting reality. So who has the work? Who gets to the work? Who has the right to the work? And your political side say, well, you're special to us. And the other side said, they're special to them. So how do we deal with that? And again, we've learned over the years, if you go into the biology of violence, the biology of conflict, I mean, truthfully, the biology of it, when you move into flight or fight, you're not thinking. One of the criticisms that was around is it's a very thought out model, but when you trigger fear, and when you trigger flight or fight, the blood in your brain goes from the neocortex into the amygdala, which is part of your reptilian part of your brain, which is the old part of the brain, and you don't give a shit about anything. You just want to get through. You go through that wall or that person because that's what it's about at that moment. Excuse my language, but it's truth to power. Guys, it's tough out there, because one of the things I have to do now back in Corrymeela, and again, this is me sharing the story of us, not you, but I imagine there's echoes in this for you, is that right now there are multiple and competing identities. One of the, by multiple, it's not just the green and the orange identity, it's not just Catholic or Protestant or nationalist or unionist. One of the benefits and one of the challenges of Northern Ireland's peace process is about 10% of its population are now migrant workers. A lot coming in from Eastern Europe. So it's no longer the Catholics are taking our jobs, it's those foreigners are taking our jobs, or vice versa, even for the Catholics. And there's people saying, no, if you're really committed to equality and those agendas, well, we don't want you going to work with wearing a cross, because it's offensive to us or whatever. It's really got confused. The equality agenda has got more challenged through diversity, and we're working our way through that. And in the middle of those fears, the narratives. And this is back to, I think, some of your modeling. Sometimes the narratives harden. By that I mean the storyline hardens, because if you're successful, people are going to leave, are going to leave that old story and try and find a new story. And that means the power group, the hegemony groups, the people with the power their structures are going to weaken. So the speaker that says you're a threat is right. We are a direct threat to that political structure in Northern Ireland, because we're speaking of a different space and a different way of living. And their jobs are on the line if we're right. They're out of office. And it's the big challenge, you probably know about zero sum. So if you win and I lose, plus and a minus, zero. I win, you lose, plus and a minus, zero. And that's how a lot of our structures are set up. Whether we compete for funding, you win it, I lose it, and so forth. You got jobs, we don't have jobs. I've got to make people redundant now. So this issue about competitive realities, that's why we need to go more partnership in our world, collaborative. And the other thing that's happening in the middle of that hardening boundary is there's a deep rivalry for victimhood in Northern Ireland. Everywhere you look, someone says, well, I'm the victim and they're the problem. Even the victims can't agree who are the victims, because you have good victims and bad victims. Do you recognize that? So if you were killed, if an IRA guy was killed by a member of the security forces, their family aren't victims. The fact that their husband has been killed, it doesn't mean there's no victimhood there. But if a policeman is killed by the IRA, of course, the whole network is a victim, and so forth. So there's a deep the past is a major problem for us. It's nearly too hard. They don't quite know what to do, because both sides are being called into the non-zero, which is let's go together. And therefore, by going together, the non-zero is we both gain and we both accept the loss. But the whole structure is set up, more for you is less for me. How do you break that narrative? Because I suppose you're going to have to do that. Heaven and hell syndrome. You probably don't have this. But in Northern Ireland, it's heaven and it's hell. Okay? It's hell because you have all the conflict. It's heaven because everybody blames somebody else for the reason you got the conflict. There's no right back at you. It's me. I'm part of this. And it makes us kind of special in Europe. We're the crazy neighbour. So we have to get paid for, keep them over there, but just keep feeding some money. But actually, in fairness, and if we talk about integrity, I'm standing you after. I would never expected to be doing this, but in some form or other, a career of 40 years in conflict. I've made a career out of this business of the conflict. It's what's paid my salary, it's what's paid my mortgage, it's paid my house. We have a peace industry going on. Now, does that mean we shouldn't have a peace industry? I'm not sure you can swing it that way either. But, ironically, our job was to put ourselves out of business. So, and this is about the co-option. So as long as my crazies out there, the people on that side and the people on that side, as long as they stay out there, they keep me employed. because I can go to a funder and say, they're not quite ready to go and make the deal yet, so can I have another grant? And then over time, in our own ears and in our organizations and in the community, there is no point. You're wasting your time. Give up. Don't bother. Go off to the golf club with the other nice people, because you're wasting your time. The voice of fear, that we can't change it, and the voice of cynicism, you will never change it. And that is a fundamental lie. The world changes all the time. We change all the time. It's a lie, and you need to feed your organizations and support your organizations to not get trapped in that lie. Hope is there. No land in sight. Columbus, I mean, I know that's a colonizer heading to the United States, but he once wrote in his journal, no land in sight, sailed on. Because it didn't show up when he thought it was going to show up. The change never happened when we thought it was going to happen. So building empathic relationships is critical to sustainable peace. In other words, if we cannot learn to walk in the shoes of the other, we are never going to do the hard work. Working as partners is about having each other's back. More for you, it's about challenging that analysis. More for you is less for me. Actually, more for you is more for me. It's a fundamental change we need to step into, and we're working on that. You cannot ask your individual staff and the teams to stay too long on that front line. It's really too hard. They're going to burn. Every army in the world knows if you keep your soldiers on the front line too long, they become casualties. Because when you're on that edge, you're getting a lot of cortisol, you're getting a lot of stuff pumped into your system, and you're stressing. Why? Because it's hard work. So you've got to pay attention to looking after your team, and it's not being soft, it's being smart. Partnerships are like marriages. They're hard work, and we need to generate, but to be valuable, they need to generate added value, not just be routes of convenience to money. Otherwise, they won't sustain. And it's so powerfully built into your model. I completely agree. It's my experience, it's our experience, it's echoing with us. But as you probably already know, they're bloody hard work, because we don't always agree. I'm usually right, my wife's wrong, but that's another story. Because she's convinced, and she's probably right, that she's right. That's back to that woman's intelligence thing again. I'm really struggling. So, but the other thing I want to point out is it's a long road, and our work is transgenerational, and most of it is slow burn rather than fast burn. It doesn't happen quickly. We need to keep this going. And I'm going to move into a little bit more fast burn to let you come back with some questions if you have them. I want to honor and congratulate you and tell you to keep going. You're building wisdom. But you need to be the wisdom keepers, and you need to keep the learning out, and you need to keep the learning moving. Deep-rooted problems need deep-rooted, empathic servant leaders. You're being called into servant leadership, and it's hard. It's not easy. Let's celebrate and re-energize for the long road. And sometimes we just need to have some fun. And I'm going to do this.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Hey, go. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high to bring me down. Can't none bring me down. I said, bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high to bring me down. Can't none bring me down. I said, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high to bring me down. Can't none bring me down. I said, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Come on.
Sometimes you just have to have some fun. And you wouldn't have recognized, but the symbolic nature of the people who were in that, it was across the whole community. That was the mayor, a DUP mayor, engaging this. This was a very right-wing mayor. That was the police stepping into this. That was kids from across the divide, just giving an opportunity to present another view. So I think it's with deep honouring. That's what you're the path that you're on. I think your model is the beginning, the end of the beginning. You need to build more, and you need to build the capacity more, and you need to keep going, and you need to see the journey as a longer journey. Anyway, thank you very much. I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, you made a joke out of this, that you earned your money from the long years you're working with it, and so if there was no conflict, you had no work. And I think we have similar jokes like this here, and I feel sometimes that people who are saying, you know, we cannot solve the conflict, but we can learn to handle it. It's in this direction. How do you feel about it?
You can take the microphone.
I think it's a really good point. So the question is, it's about the journey. So I think coexistence is better than violence, but it's not the end point. So I think it's about understanding the phases that we're in. So the analogy I often use is if two guys were in the street punching each other out, and I stepped into the middle of them, what would happen to me? I'd get punched out. If I stepped in them and says, let's have a talk about this, guys, it's not going to work. So there's times when you need to move, there's times when you need to back off, there's times when you need to be ready to go in. So I think that there's a series of phases, but it's understanding if we don't build together a common shared mental model of success, technically is what they call it. If we don't work together to build a shared mental model of success, then we stop when the heat comes down. It's good enough. We buy off with good enough, and it's not good enough because I don't want to go too technical. I'm going to probably do some of this tomorrow in the workshop, but if you don't change the background narrative, it will find a way to come back. So we have to work to change the narrative, and that's something that we're really pushing into at the moment. So yes, you're right, and it is. I don't apologize for doing the work because it needed done, but I've got to step back and be prepared to look honestly in the mirror and not get co-opted just because it's convenient to stay in the middle. I've got to speak to the space that I'm calling people to as well, and that can be difficult.
Hi. You were talking about the financial crisis, losing of jobs, leaving your children less than the opportunity that you had. Can it be a bridge? Did you try to make it a bridge between the two sides? Can it overcome the differences in the narrative?
Well, there are two parts to the question. One is the background, changing realities, which wasn't driven so much by the conflict. So there's two parts to that. One is I do think we need to look at the economic story, the broad economic story, so it creates a future for people. But I'm trying to symbolize this. I'm kind of lost without a flip chart. I'm not looking for a flip chart, but because usually I would run to a flip chart now and start drawing things. But it's not. You see, that's in one sense you're pointing to the problem. We were hoping by creating a bridge between these two places, they would somehow become one. And actually, they just experience it as a loss of their narrative. And we haven't articulated, actually there's two bridges. What you're really trying to do is a bridge to the middle from both sides, if you see what I mean. We need two bridges, not one. And that because the middle ground needs to be spoken to, it needs to be articulated in a way. I'll introduce a term here. It's called mimesis, mimetic. It's about being desirable. If we have failed, in Northern Ireland, I don't know about you guys, but we have failed to make the middle ground desirable to the point where people want to stand up and work for it. That's our failure. And it was misintended because we just thought we'll bridge these two guys and they'll all figure it out and go, they naturally want to be there. But it's not articulated because it's too much loss from that side. The journey of travel from there to there is difficult enough. So anyway, I think that's the point that I would say. There are our sector, just to kind of come back a little bit on the economic point. The major development in a lot of our organisational sector, the charitable sector in Northern Ireland, is moving towards social enterprise. So we're trying to create new economic models for ourselves. So people are vesting land. So I know one organisation that then build apartments and people are paying rent for those apartments, and that rent is now driving the projects. So there's another people are doing organic cafes and creating, urban farms, and they're bringing the farm and they're creating organic food and healthy living. So there's a number of ways that this is emerging, and I think that's a huge future. It's not just about the funders; it's about sustainability and ourselves.
אני אשאל בעברית כי זו השפה שנוח לי לדבר בה. היא מתרגמת אותי פה
Somebody can
מהר.
translate, maybe.
כן, כן, כן.
I'll translate.
זה פשוט מעורר השראה לראות את ההומור ואת החגיגת שלום הזאת שיש בצפון אירלנד, משהו שלטעמי מאוד חסר אצלנו בישראל פלסטין. ורציתי לדעת אם יש איזשהו שלב שאתה יכול לשים עליו את האצבע, שבו זה התחיל, שזה הפך להיות חגיגי.
It's great to see this fest of humor and fun that we just saw now. And Racheli wanted to know if there's some sort of point in time that you can put your finger on and say, this is where we started using humor, this is when we started being a bit more lighthearted.
It's a good question. Can you to translate? Yeah. Young people, in the end, don't like being serious all the time and being burdened by the pain and anguish of the adults. Because they're young, they're looking out at a future and they want what they see in television, or they want something. I mean, whether that's sustainable or not, leave that. But they're looking for other options. And in the end, we found that we were boring them to death with constant saying, well, you need to get really serious about understanding sectarianism, or you need to get let's talk about it again, and they're kind of going, well, hold on a minute. Your future, we want to imagine a different set of possibilities. So can you get over it and let us have some fun together? Now, it wasn't avoidance of, that could get cheap very quickly. That could get, well, we'll just have fun and pretend the big things are not real. But you've got to take people on a journey into that. The young people, this was inspired by young people. There's another video I could show. I'll maybe show it tomorrow or something. But and absolutely blows me away. And again, other than what was the? By the way, you probably wouldn't pick this up, but one of the most remarkable things about that video is it starts with a black kid. Northern Ireland for a long time was the most white place in Europe. Okay. So, but there is a video of a group of young women from across the divide got together, worked with a rock group. We set it up, and they constructed a song, went into a recording studio. It's now up on iTunes. People are downloading that song and it's feeding the charity that they're doing. And it's a brilliant song. I mean, I happen to think it's a brilliant song. It's okay, it's a bunch of kids, but it is, I had tears in my eyes because of the passion and if you listen to the words, what they're speaking and singing about a new future. So we've got to release that imagining and that set of possibilities. So it's not, but will that change things? No, but it sure as hell is a good start. So it's not about staying, that's enough, good, we had a nice time, we all had fun, but that's the platform through which you help them move to the next stage and bring them and call them into the servant leadership. It's not just the grey hairs. I have to get out of the way. No, I've got to move into succession planning. I've got to create new people to come through. I want somebody else standing in this podium if we meet again, and not the old grey hair. That's my task, is to mentor and coach and get out of the way and let the future come through.
I got a question about the narrative.
Yep.
That you say that to change narrative. I'm asking you if it's to change narrative or to create one, a new one.
Good question. Probably create. because I mean it's both and. Maybe the answer is both, because to create a new one, you have to change. You have to let the old one go. I actually am very tempted. We've got a couple of minutes. I'm very tempted to do. I need my techies again. Where did that? There's a video in here. Let's have a look. See the quicksand? That one there. Quicksand robot. Okay. One of the things I'll try and say. One of the things that we started. Just hold it. Yeah. I don't know if anybody's seen this online, but it's about the grief cycle. Changing narrative or creating a new narrative creates grief because you have to let the old narrative go. Okay, and it's not easy. It's back to yeah. Translate that?
No, it's okay.
Okay, and it's really hard because it's a pain because the world that gave you certainty is no longer there. I mean, I'll put it into another context, which is, you know, our world is secularizing. By that I mean people are leaving the church, but also priests are leaving the church. Now you imagine a priest, well, because they're waking up one day thinking, you know what, I fancy having some sex. You know, I'd like to get married. There's this beautiful girl over here, and I'm celibate, and I can't do that anymore. So there's all kinds of reasons. I mean, I'm being, you know, I'm being Irish here. I'm being sort of, but the point is, you just imagine for a second what it means for someone who's dedicated their life to a belief, to wake up one day and imagine, I don't believe this anymore. This doesn't work for me. And how do I speak to that? Where do I speak to that? How do I move it on? And then move all the way through to saying, I'm actually leaving. Now, I'm just characterizing it in this way. You know, you have grown up in major, I don't know what they are, but you've had the narrative of your people, your story, whose history, who was here first, who wasn't here first, and all of that. You know, as if that determines today. And it doesn't. This is the changing realities. If you don't deal with climate, you know, I'll put it another way. If you don't deal with climate change, there won't be anybody here in another 50 years because it'll be a desert, unless you fancy living in the Sahara. You know, but maybe not. But there's a real possibility that you're going to dry up. We got battered. We were, you know, over late November, December, January, right through to early February, we had 8 major storms came through. Now, we would get one storm. We would get but I'm talking about force 10, this major 50-mile-an-hour plus winds coming through. You know, this is climate change. It's exactly what's expected. We had you saw south of England got flooded out. So it's just early indicators. So this is real, in my view. And unfortunately, I'm having to hand this to many of you in this room and your children. Because I am, again, I belong to I was born in 1954. I belong to the most privileged generation ever to live on the planet. Because in that year, nobody could imagine where we are now. And in one lifetime, just one lifetime, that's the speed of change. This is unheard of. It's unheard of. So that's the speed of change that's coming through. So, you know, apologies for that. We didn't know it, but there it is. We're going to have to deal with it. So let's step up. Let me put this on for you. So this is about the grief cycle. And again, we use this because it's a very simple approach to understanding the grief cycle. I'm looking for the office here. You see I'm good with technology? Right, this is a bit rude. Okay. There is some language in this that gets a little bit juicy.
It's no big deal. It's probably not even quicksand. I'm gonna have a good laugh about this tonight with the guys. Well, this is just perfect. Stupid quicksand, stupid jungle. I want to bite someone in the face. Mother, ah, that stupid jungle. Are you there, God? It's me, Giraffe. Listen, if you would just give me a mulligan on this quicksand thing, I promise. No more peeing on your shorter creatures. What, you get a deal? You know something? I'm cool with this. I bet heaven has all the tender leaves I can eat, and everyone gets their own Slurpee machine. Yeah, take me, sweet death. I await your loving embrace. What? I think I hit the bottom.
We need to understand that the grief cycle is real, and people, and you know, if you've gone through bereavement, you've gone through loss, you've gone through bereavement, you've gone through deep hurt. You know, this is a well recognized pattern, and for us to change the narrative, create a new narrative, we have to understand that there's pain involved in the letting go, because the old certainty doesn't work anymore. So how do we call people into new imaginings, and where we build the commitment to find the new certainty? Thank you very much. Let's have a break.